The taillights of Bryce's car were disappearing into the darkness, and I stood there on the side of the road alone, shivering in the cold night air. "Get out, Carter. I don't want you in my life anymore," he had said without looking back, then threw open the door. I thought he was joking at first, some cruel attempt to make a point. But when he hit the accelerator, reality crashed down on me. All I had were my phone in my trembling hands and a shattered heart in my chest. It had started with something so small. We were driving back from dinner and I had casually mentioned that his best friend Landon seemed a little too touchy with me lately. That was all I said. Nothing accusatory, just an observation. But Bryce exploded like I had committed some unforgivable sin. "You're always so insecure, Carter. It's just friendship," he snapped, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I tried to explain that I was simply uncomfortable, that I wasn't attacking him or Landon, but he wouldn't hear it. Every sentence I spoke seemed to fuel his anger even more. "I always prioritize your feelings, and you can't even trust me," he said, his voice dripping with that familiar rage I had learned to recognize too well over the past 2 years. But all I wanted was him to see things from my perspective, to understand why I felt uncomfortable. To Bryce, though, this was just another example of my insecurity, nothing more than my personal problem to deal with. When he pulled the car over to the side of the highway and told me to get out, I looked into his eyes, searching for some sign that he didn't mean it. There was anger there, disappointment, and maybe something else I couldn't identify in that moment. "Bryce, please," was all I managed to say, but he was already lost in his own fury, completely unreachable. I opened the door and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder, and he didn't wait even a second. He just accelerated and drove away, as if I had never been there at all, as if 2 years meant nothing. I stood there for a while trying to process what had just happened. From here to my apartment was a 5-mile stretch, and it was nearly midnight now. No taxis were visible on this empty highway. No ride-share apps were showing available drivers at this hour. Just me, this dark road, and the streetlights casting their orange glow into the night. I started walking because there was no other choice. The first steps felt heavy, like my legs had forgotten how to move properly, like I was dragging myself forward through sheer force of will. But then something strange began to happen inside me. With each step, a clarity started to emerge that I had never experienced before. This walk wasn't just punishment from Bryce's anger. It was becoming something else entirely for me. Memories began flashing through my mind, all those times Bryce had ignored me, all those moments when he dismissed my feelings as overdramatic, all those instances when he put his friends ahead of me without a second thought. And then it hit me with stunning force. I had always been the one adjusting in this relationship. Always. Whether it was our plans, his priorities, or his moods, I was the person who bent, who accommodated, who sacrificed. But tonight, when he left me here on this cold road, something broke inside me, and maybe that thing needed to break. The road was empty except for the occasional distant sound of cars on some other highway. The cold was intensifying, my breath forming small clouds in front of my face. But I kept walking. Maybe whatever I was finding on this walk, clarity, anger, pain, understanding, was exactly what I needed. Bryce had abandoned me on the road, but perhaps on this very path, I would find the version of myself I had lost somewhere along the way. The temperature kept dropping, and I pulled my jacket tighter around myself. My phone buzzed once, a notification from some app, and for a split second my heart jumped, thinking it might be Bryce calling to apologize, to come back and get me. But it was just a random promotional message. I felt foolish for even hoping. Why would he call? In his mind, he was probably already justified. Already the victim of my supposed jealousy and insecurity. That was how our arguments always went. He would do something that hurt me, I would try to express how I felt, and somehow by the end of it I was the one apologizing. I thought about the early days of our relationship, how different everything had been. Bryce used to listen to me then, used to care about my opinions and feelings. Or had he? Maybe I had just been too blinded by the excitement of being with someone to notice the red flags that were there from the beginning. Maybe I had convinced myself that love meant accepting someone's flaws even when those flaws were slowly eroding my sense of self-worth. A car passed by, and for a moment I considered trying to flag it down, to ask for a ride. But something stopped me. I needed this walk. I needed to feel every step, every moment of this abandonment. Because only then would I truly understand what I had been accepting all this time. My feet were starting to hurt. My dress shoes not designed for long walks on rough pavement. But the physical pain was almost welcome. It gave me something concrete to focus on instead of the emotional turmoil churning inside me. The street lights stretched ahead of me like a path I had to follow, each one marking my progress toward home, toward whatever came next. I thought about all the times I had made excuses for Bryce's behavior to my friends, to my family, to myself. How many times had Quinn tried to tell me that this relationship wasn't healthy? How many times had I defended Bryce, insisting that he was just stressed, that things would get better, that all couples go through rough patches? But this wasn't a rough patch. This was a pattern. And tonight, walking alone on this empty road, I finally had to face that truth. The cold air stung my face, but I welcomed it. It made me feel alive, made me feel present in this moment instead of floating through life on autopilot the way I had been doing. Each step was taking me away from where Bryce had taken me and towards something I couldn't quite name yet. Not home, exactly, but somewhere I needed to be. Somewhere I could start figuring out who Carter was when he wasn't constantly trying to please Bryce. When he wasn't walking on eggshells, when he wasn't sacrificing his own needs for someone who clearly didn't value them. The walk continued, and with it my transformation had already begun. I reached my apartment as the clock struck 4 in the morning. My feet were throbbing, every muscle in my legs screaming in protest from the 5-mile journey, and exhaustion was weighing me down so heavily that I collapsed onto the couch without even turning on the lights. But sleep wouldn't come. No matter how physically drained I was, my mind kept replaying the scene of Bryce throwing me out of the car. The shock, the hurt, the disbelief I had felt in that moment, all of it was slowly transforming into anger now. How could he do that? Someone I loved, someone I had planned my future with, had treated me like I was nothing. You know what, Bryce? Your attitude will never change, I said out loud to the empty apartment, as if he were standing right there listening. But he wasn't here, and honestly he probably didn't even care where I was or how I had gotten home. When I finally picked up my phone in the morning, that suspicion was confirmed. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. Bryce hadn't even bothered to check if I was okay. That hurt even more than the long walk had. Didn't he feel any guilt? Wasn't he wondering how I had managed to get home in the middle of the night? I thought about texting him, my fingers hovering over the screen, but then I stopped myself. No. If he wanted to apologize, he needed to reach out first. I was always the one taking the first step, always the one trying to smooth things over, always the one working toward peace, regardless of who was actually at fault. Not this time. This time I would wait and see what Bryce actually did when left to his own conscience. By afternoon, there was still no sign from him. No text, no call, nothing. I decided I needed to see my best friend Quinn because staying alone was driving me crazy. Quinn was the kind of person who always spoke the truth, no matter how bitter it tasted, and right now that was exactly what I needed. When I told him everything, being abandoned on the road, walking all night, Bryce's complete radio silence, he sat quietly for a few moments, just staring at his coffee cup. Then he asked, "Carter, do you honestly think Bryce values you?" I couldn't answer because deep down I knew the truth. And that truth was too painful to voice out loud. I've been telling you for 2 years that he's not right for you. You're always second in his priorities, sometimes even third, Quinn said, frustration creeping into his voice. His words contained that harsh reality I had been avoiding for so long. But if I wanted anything to change, I had to face it now. As evening approached, Bryce finally sent a message. Just 3 words, "We need to talk." Looking at those words on my screen made a cold sensation spread through my chest. This didn't sound like the Bryce who used to call me baby and say I love you every day. This was formal, distant, like a stranger conducting business. I didn't reply right away. If he wanted to talk, he could come to me face to face. I wasn't going to compromise my self-respect anymore, no matter how much my heart was aching. Quinn saw the message and squeezed my shoulder. "Let him wait, Carter. You've done plenty of waiting for him. Now it's his turn." That night, as I was trying to fall asleep around midnight, there was a knock at my door. My heart rate immediately spiked. Bryce. It had to be him. I opened the door to find him standing there with messy hair, tired eyes, and a hint of guilt in his expression. "Carter, I "I want to talk to you," he said, his voice softer than usual. But I kept my grip firm on the door, not inviting him inside. "Now you want to talk? When you left me alone in the dark last night you didn't want to talk then." I had never used such a firm tone with him before. His expression shifted. He clearly hadn't expected me to react this way. "I was angry, Carter. I made a mistake," he said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "A mistake? Bryce, you abandoned me on the road. At night. Alone," I said, enunciating each word clearly. "I keep trying to explain my feelings to you, but you never want to listen. You just want to show your anger, and then say sorry like that magically erases everything." I finally said everything I had been holding inside for 2 years. Everything I had wanted to say but kept quiet to save the relationship. Bryce stood there silently for a few seconds, as if he needed time to process that I was actually standing up for myself. "So what do you want now?" he asked, getting slightly defensive. I looked directly into his eyes and said clearly, "I don't know yet, Bryce. But one thing I do know, this relationship can't continue the way it was before. I won't keep adjusting when you're in the wrong." With that, I slowly closed the door, leaving Bryce standing outside, perhaps realizing for the first time that he had actually lost something valuable. After the door closed, I leaned my back against it, eyes shut, heart pounding. This was difficult, but it was necessary. The apartment felt different now, like the air itself had changed. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking slightly. Standing up to Bryce like that had taken every ounce of courage I had, and now that the adrenaline was fading, I felt simultaneously empowered and terrified. What if this was really the end? What if I had just thrown away 2 years over one argument? But then I reminded myself, this wasn't about one argument. This was about 2 years of a pattern I had been too afraid to confront. I sat down at my small dining table and really looked around my apartment for the first time in what felt like forever. How much of my life had I arranged around Bryce's preferences? The throw pillows he liked, the coffee brand he preferred, the way I had organized my schedule to accommodate his. Even my apartment had become an extension of trying to please him. When had I stopped living for myself? My phone buzzed again. Probably Bryce trying to text now that I had closed the door on him. But I didn't pick it up. For the first time in our entire relationship, I was choosing to sit with my own thoughts and feelings without immediately rushing to fix things with him. It felt strange and uncomfortable, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet, but it also felt like the first honest thing I had done in a long time. Quinn had been right all along, but I hadn't been ready to hear it until I found myself walking alone on that dark road, forced to confront the truth I had been running from. When I woke up the next morning, there was a strange sense of calm that I hadn't felt in days. It was as if some invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders, even though there was still an ache in my chest. Last night's conversation with Bryce had probably been necessary, because now it was crystal clear that we weren't on the same page at all. But thinking about how he used to be everything to me, and now we were talking like strangers, that realization brought its own kind of pain. I made coffee and settled onto the sofa, my phone lying silent nearby. Bryce hadn't responded after I closed the door on him, and I hadn't sent him anything either. Maybe this silence was exactly what we both needed right now. By afternoon at the office, concentrating on work felt impossible. My laptop was open on my desk, but the same presentation slide kept staring back at me without any progress. My mind was stuck on last night's conversation. The look on Bryce's face when I shut the door, the helplessness in his voice. My colleagues were starting to notice something was off. "Carter, you okay?" my coworker Elliot asks, setting his coffee cup down on my desk. I managed a weak smile and said, "Yeah, just a rough week." But Elliot was perceptive and knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. "If you need to talk about anything, I'm available," he offered before walking away. That simple gesture made me realize that maybe there were people who genuinely cared without any expectations, without any drama attached. When I got back to my apartment that evening, I randomly opened Instagram and discovered that Bryce had unfollowed me. At first it seemed like such a trivial thing. What does social media really matter? But it clearly demonstrated his mentality. Whenever something didn't go his way, he created distance so he wouldn't have to deal with it directly. Out of curiosity, I checked his profile and saw he had posted a story with his friends. They were laughing, having fun, as if nothing had happened over the past 2 days. Seeing that made me feel both angry and hurt. I asked myself, was I really so unimportant in his life that he could move on this easily? But then I closed my phone because continuing to look at that was only making the pain worse. Quinn texted me that evening to invite me to dinner. "Don't sit at home alone, Carter. Let's go out," his message read. I went because staying alone was starting to feel suffocating. We sat in a quiet restaurant, a place where there weren't many people and we could talk peacefully. Quinn didn't waste any time before asking directly, "So what's your plan now? Are you going back to him?" I shook my head decisively. "No, Quinn. Not this time. I'm exhausted from constantly making adjustments, from always compromising myself." Quinn gently squeezed my shoulder in understanding. "That's good. You should have made this decision a long time ago, but better late than never." Then he ordered a beer and said with a slight smile, "Let's celebrate tonight. Your freedom." But celebrating wasn't easy when my heart was still broken and everything around me kept reminding me of Bryce. When I returned home around 10 that night, there was a voicemail notification from him. I paused for a few seconds, debating whether to listen to it or not, then pressed play. "Carter, I honestly don't know what to say. I genuinely love you, but it seems like I don't know how to show it properly. Please give me another chance. We can fix everything. I promise I'll change." There was a desperation in his voice that I had never heard before, not this clearly. But there's a difference between desperation and genuine regret, and I was beginning to understand that distinction. Did Bryce really want to change for himself and for me? Or did he just want to pull me back into his comfort zone where everything operated according to his rules? I put my phone down without replying to the voicemail. Making a decision wasn't as simple as it had seemed before. I lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling. Bryce's voice kept echoing in my ears. "I promise I'll change." But how many times had I heard that promise before? And how many times had it been broken? I got up and walked to my window, looking out at the street below. Somewhere out there was the road where Bryce had abandoned me, where I had walked for hours in the cold and darkness. That walk had changed something fundamental inside me. It had forced me to see the relationship for what it really was, not what I had been pretending it was. I had been so invested in the idea of us, in the future I had imagined, that I had ignored all the signs telling me this wasn't healthy. My phone lit up again. Another message from Bryce. This time it read, "I'm outside your building. Can we please talk in person? I need to see you." My first instinct was to go down to hear him out, to give him yet another chance. But I stopped myself. How many chances had I already given? How many times had we had this exact same conversation where he promised to change, where I believed him and then everything went back to the way it was? I typed back a simple response. "I need more time to think. Please respect that." It took all my strength to hit send, but I did it. Almost immediately, my phone rang. Bryce was calling. I stared at his name flashing on the screen, my thumb hovering over the answer button. But I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then he called again. And again. After the fourth call, I turned my phone off completely. Sitting in the darkness of my apartment, I realized this was the first time I had ever truly put myself first in our relationship. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if Bryce and I would find a way to work through this or if this was really the end. But for tonight, I was choosing me. I was choosing to sit with my own pain and confusion instead of rushing to make Bryce feel better. I thought about calling Quinn to tell him what was happening, but I decided against it. This was something I needed to process alone. I made myself some tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, Bryce was probably still waiting outside my building, probably frustrated and confused about why I wasn't running down to talk to him the way I always had before. But I wasn't that Carter anymore. That walk on the dark road had shown me who I had become. Someone who had lost himself trying to be enough for someone else. And now, sitting here in my quiet apartment, I was starting to remember who I used to be before Bryce. Before all the compromising and adjusting and apologizing for having feelings. The journey back to that person wasn't going to be easy, but at least now I had finally started walking in the right direction. I deliberately started ignoring Bryce over the next few days. His calls, his messages, his voicemails, All of them went unanswered. This was the first time I had ever been this strong for myself. The first time I was prioritizing my own mental peace over keeping him happy. But it wasn't easy at all. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would jump, urging me to check what he was saying, wondering if it might be something important. But my mind kept firmly refusing. Quinn had told me that this no-contact period was essential for both of us. You both need space, Carter. If your relationship is genuinely strong and worth saving, it will survive this. If it's not, then it's better you find out now instead of wasting more years. He had explained with pure logic. There was undeniable sense in what he said, but emotions never understand logic. After a week had passed, I intentionally tried to settle myself into a completely new routine. I started going to the gym in the mornings, something I had never done regularly before. At the office, I actually focused on my work instead of just pretending to be productive while my mind wandered. In the evenings, I spent time with Quinn or Elliot, building connections that didn't revolve around Bryce. Life was moving forward without him, and that realization was both strange and frightening. I had always felt like he was a core part of my existence, like I wasn't complete without him, but now I was beginning to understand that maybe he had just become a habit over time, a toxic habit that I had convinced myself I needed. One night when sleep refused to come, I wrote in my journal, "Does love really require this much effort, or should it happen naturally, effortlessly, like breathing?" There was no answer to that question, but asking it felt significant in itself. Then one day at the office, Elliot casually offered to take me out for coffee. "Just as friends, Carter. I think you need to get outside for a bit, get some fresh air. You've been looking really stressed lately," he said with genuine concern in his voice. I agreed without overthinking it. We sat together in a cozy cafe where soft music played in the background, creating a peaceful atmosphere I hadn't experienced in weeks. For the first time, I properly shared my feelings with someone other than Bryce. I told Elliot everything: the road incident, that long night walk, my realizations during those dark hours, and now this confusion about what to do moving forward. Elliot listened quietly, sipping his coffee, and when I had finished saying everything I needed to say, he carefully chose his words. "You deserve someone who treats you like a priority, Carter, not an option they remember only when it's convenient for them," he said simply. His words contained such straightforward truth, and it was the reality I had slowly been accepting. Maybe Bryce could never become the person I wanted him to be, the person I actually deserve. When I got home that night, there was an unexpected package sitting outside my door. I carefully picked it up and brought it inside, opening it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter from Bryce, his handwriting that I knew so well it was almost painful to see, and along with it, the engagement ring he had given me when he proposed. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the letter. It was 2 full pages long, and it read, "Carter, I know I messed up terribly. I know I hurt you in ways I can't even fully comprehend. I'm not asking you to come back to me right now because I know I haven't earned that right. But I want you to know that you've forced me to try becoming a better person. If you believe we're completely finished, then I'll accept that. But if there's even the slightest chance, even 1%, then please tell me." Reading those words brought tears to my eyes that I couldn't hold back. For the first time, Bryce had genuinely admitted his fault without making excuses, without shifting blame onto me. I picked up the ring carefully, feeling its weight in my palm. This ring represented so much to me, a promise we had made to each other, a future we had planned together, a commitment I had taken seriously. But did it still hold the same meaning after everything that had happened? I immediately called Quinn and told him about the package, the letter, the ring, all of it. "So what is your heart honestly telling you?" he asked directly. "My heart is telling me to give him another chance, but my mind is saying that would be a mistake. I'll regret," I answered honestly, expressing my confusion clearly. Quinn thought for a moment, then said, "Carter, listen to both your heart and your mind. But when you make your final decision, think about where you want to be a year from now. Realistically, with Bryce fighting the same fights over and over, or without him living peacefully on your own terms." That question circled through my head all night long, even invading my dreams. When I woke up the next morning, it was still there, demanding an answer. Where did I see myself 1 year from now? I spent the morning staring at that letter, reading it over and over again, searching for sincerity between the lines. Was this desperation speaking, or had Bryce truly understood what he had done? I thought about all the promises he had made before, all the times he had sworn to change, and how quickly things had returned to their old patterns. But I also remembered the good times, the moments when we had genuinely connected, when I had felt loved and valued. Were those moments enough to build on, or were they just fleeting exceptions in an otherwise troubled relationship? I picked up my phone several times to call him, but each time I stopped myself. What would I even say? That I was considering giving him another chance. That I was terrified of making the wrong choice. That part of me wanted to believe people could change, while another part knew that meaningful change required more than just words on paper. The ring sat on my coffee table, catching the light whenever I walked past it, a constant reminder of the decision I needed to make. By evening, I had made up my mind about one thing. I needed to see Bryce face to face before I could decide anything. A letter, no matter how heartfelt, couldn't replace an actual conversation where I could look into his eyes and gauge whether his regret was genuine. I drafted a message several times, deleting and rewriting until I found the right words. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment before I finally pressed it, feeling like I was setting something irreversible into motion. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of our relationship, but also who I would become on the other side of this crisis. The next morning, I finally sent Bryce a message after hours of deliberation. Let's meet and talk. But this time, we do it properly. No anger, no yelling, no walking out. His response came almost immediately, as if he had been waiting by his phone. Where and when? I'm ready whenever you are. I suggested a neutral cafe, a place that was new to both of us, somewhere without any memories attached to it. This was a test for both of us. Could we actually have a productive conversation without letting our emotions hijack everything? When I arrived at the cafe the next afternoon, Bryce was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked nervous, which was unusual, because Bryce had always been the confident one in every situation. His leg was bouncing under the table, and he kept running his hand through his hair, a telltale sign of his anxiety. Carter, he said as I approached, as if speaking my name could somehow automatically resolve everything between us. I sat down across from him, deliberately maintaining some distance, and for several seconds we just sat there in silence, looking at each other across the small table that suddenly felt like an enormous divide. Bryce, I need to ask you some questions, and I want you to be completely honest, even if the truth is difficult to hear. I began firmly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He nodded seriously, his eyes locked on mine. Do you genuinely believe you never made me a priority? He asked first, a slight defensive edge already creeping into his tone. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts before responding. Absolutely. Your friends, your schedule, your convenience, everything always came before me. Bryce, I said clearly, not softening the truth to protect his feelings. He looked down at his coffee cup, avoiding direct eye contact, and spoke slowly. I didn't realize the extent of it. You never complained about it seriously. A bitter laugh escaped me naturally, because every time I tried to express how I felt, you dismissed me as overdramatic, insecure, or overthinking. So I learned to stay quiet, because speaking up only led to arguments, never to actual change. This truth was probably the first time he was hearing it stated so plainly, and his expression showed clear shock at my words. Carter, I had no idea you were feeling all of this internally. I genuinely believed you were fine with how things were, he said, guilt evident in his voice. I placed my hand flat on the table and looked directly into his eyes without flinching. Bryce, I was never fine with it. I was constantly adjusting, continuously compromising my own happiness for yours. And that night, when you abandoned me on the road, leaving me to walk alone through the darkness, I realized how worthless I felt in this relationship, like my value meant nothing to you. My words were sharp and direct, but they needed to be said. If our relationship was going to survive in any form, it would be built on truth, not on lies and assumptions. I had decided that I would no longer hide my real feeling. Bryce looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine guilt in his eyes, real regret that didn't seem manufactured or performative. I'm truly sorry, Carter. From the bottom of my heart, I mean that. I didn't realize I had been hurting you so consistently. If you give me another chance, I promise I'll completely fix my priorities. You'll become my absolute first priority. I swear it, he said, sincerity ringing in his voice. Hearing this sparked a small flame of hope in my heart naturally, but I immediately controlled myself mentally. Words are easy to speak, actions are what matter. Bryce, I don't want to hear any more promises from you. I want to see actual consistent changes over time, I said firmly without any hesitation. He agreed, nodding seriously, but we both understood that this was the real test of our relationship, and his commitment to change. We left the cafe about an hour later after our conversation had run its course, and Bryce gently tried to take my hand the way he used to before everything fell apart. I hesitated and pulled away. Not yet, Bryce. Let's start over as friends first and take things slowly. If you genuinely believe this relationship is worth saving, then prove it through your actions, not your words, I said clearly. He nodded, disappointment visible in his eyes but also understanding. Walking toward home afterward, I wondered whether I had made the right decision by giving him this opportunity. Maybe this was a mistake that I would come to regret deeply, or maybe it was a genuine new beginning that could actually turn out better than before. Only time would reveal the truth. But this time I was standing up for myself strongly, setting clear boundaries that I wouldn't allow to be crossed. And that feeling, though somewhat scary because it was unfamiliar territory, was also deeply empowering. For the first time in our entire relationship, I felt like I was in control of my own life and my own happiness. Whether to give Bryce a chance or not, that was my decision to make, and I wasn't feeling pressured by anyone. When I got home, I called Quinn and told him everything that had happened. I'm proud of you, Carter. What you said to him took real courage, he said warmly, his approval meaning more to me than I had expected. I smiled properly for the first time in several days, feeling like maybe I was finally on the right path. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the conversation, replaying certain moments in my mind. Bryce had seemed genuinely remorseful, genuinely willing to change, but I had seen that willingness before, and it had always faded once things returned to normal. This time had to be different. This time I would be watching carefully, paying attention to his actions rather than getting swept up in his words. I would maintain my boundaries, continue investing in my own life and friendships, and not make Bryce the center of my entire existence the way I had before. If he truly wanted me back, he would have to earn it through consistent effort and genuine change. And if he couldn't do that, then I would know with certainty that walking away was the right choice. Either way, I was no longer willing to lose myself in trying to make someone else happy. That version of Carter was gone, transformed during that long walk on the dark road, and I had no intention of ever going back to being him again. The following weeks were strange but surprisingly peaceful. Bryce and I began talking like friends slowly, carefully, but the intimate aspects of our relationship were deliberately absent because I needed that space. He was genuinely making an effort that was visible in everything he did. His messages were sweet without being pushy or demanding. He included me in his plans by actually asking if I wanted to join rather than assuming, and when he made plans with his friends, he properly invited me instead of just expecting me to know I wasn't welcome. These were small things that had never happened naturally before, but they meant everything to me because they showed he was actually trying to change his behavior patterns. When I mentioned all this to Quinn over coffee one day, he responded cautiously, "The changes seem real on the surface, Carter, but you need to test them over time. Give it several more weeks. See if the consistency holds or if he slips back into old habits." I agreed with him completely because I wanted to be careful too. I didn't want to rush back into the same toxic patterns that had nearly destroyed me. One evening, Bryce unexpectedly invited me to dinner at his apartment. I hesitated initially, thinking maybe it was too soon for that level of intimacy, but curiosity about what he had planned eventually won out, and I accepted. When I arrived at his place, the entire apartment was softly decorated with candles, creating a warm glow, and on the table sat homemade pasta that smelled absolutely delicious. "Did you actually make all this yourself?" I asked in genuine surprise, because Bryce had never shown any interest in cooking before. He gave me a nervous smile that reminded me of the early days of our relationship. "I learned from YouTube videos specifically for you. I know I'm terrible at cooking and this probably isn't perfect, but I wanted to do something special that required real effort on my part," he said honestly. This simple gesture might seem small on the surface, but for me it was emotionally significant. For the first time ever, he had put in actual effort for me without any special occasion or expectation of reciprocation. During dinner we shared old memories, the good ones that had gotten buried under all our recent fights and resentments. We talked about when we first met randomly at that coffee shop, when he had proposed to me on the beach at sunset with his voice shaking, when we had stayed up all night discussing our dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Remembering all of this made me realize that there had genuinely been something beautiful between us once, something that had gotten lost beneath layers of ego and misunderstandings. Carter, I want you back properly and completely, but I understand that rebuilding trust takes significant time and consistent effort. I'm ready to wait however long it takes, Bryce said seriously, gently placing his hand over mine on the table. This time I didn't immediately pull my hand away. I let him hold it, let myself feel that connection again. After dinner, we moved to sit on his sofa in comfortable silence, and Bryce carefully pulled me closer to him, constantly checking to make sure I was comfortable with the proximity. I'll never intentionally hurt you again, Carter. This entire experience has been a major lesson for me about what truly matters in life, he whispered near my ear, his breath warm against my skin. I looked deeply into his eyes and saw truth there, genuine emotion that seemed authentic. But still, a small seed of doubt remained in my heart, which felt natural given everything we had been through. Bryce, if we have another serious argument in the future, what will you do differently? I asked, testing his commitment to change. I'll listen to you properly first instead of reacting defensively. I'll think carefully about your perspective before I respond. And no matter how angry I might get, I will never push you away physically or emotionally the way I did that night, he promised while looking straight into my eyes with unwavering focus. These were exactly the words I had needed to hear for confirmation. That night, we mutually decided to restart our relationship, but with a new understanding that hadn't existed before. The old physical chemistry was still there between us, but now there was also an emotional maturity that had been completely missing previously. Before I left to go home, I told Bryce seriously, if something goes seriously wrong again, I won't stay this time, Bryce. I've learned to value myself properly, and I refuse to go back to that dark place. He agreed without any hesitation, complete sincerity in his response. I don't want you to ever feel what you felt that night when I abandoned you. That was the biggest mistake of my entire life, and I'll never forgive myself for it, he admitted openly, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. This conversation was our actual turning point, the one both of us had desperately needed. I realized that the walk which had initially broken me emotionally was the same walk that had clearly taught me my own self-worth and strength. When I returned to my apartment late that night, Quinn's message was already waiting for me. So what happened? I need all the details. I smiled while typing my reply. We're trying again, but this time I'm keeping myself intact throughout the process. I'll maintain my boundaries no matter what. Quinn immediately sent back a thumbs up emoji and a heart. I walked to my window and looked outside at the street below, the same road where Bryce had abandoned me that fateful night. But now that road didn't represent fear or pain for me anymore. It had become a powerful reminder, a reminder that I could stand up for myself when necessary, and that nobody could make me feel worthless unless I emotionally allowed them that power over me. Bryce and my relationship was entering a new and hopefully better phase, and whatever happened in the future, whether good or difficult, I knew that I was fundamentally stronger now as an individual person. That walk had taught me that sometimes breaking apart is absolutely necessary, so you can rebuild yourself stronger than before. And if Bryce was genuinely changing his behavior patterns, then this could be a beautiful new beginning for both of us. But if he wasn't, if he slipped back into his old ways, then I was completely ready to choose myself without guilt or regret. For the first time in my life, I was truly ready for any outcome, confident in my ability to handle whatever came next. I had found myself again during those dark hours, walking alone, and I would never lose that person again, no matter what happened with Bryce or anyone else. That was my promise to myself, and unlike so many other promises in my life, this was one I intended to keep no matter what obstacles appeared in my path forward.